I'm in the process of building some nesting tables, and they're made out of white oak. And since white oak is one of the worst as far as expansion and contraction due to moisture, I wanted to make sure I attached the tabletops properly. So I've experimented with some different fasteners. Some are sort of an elegant solution, some are a little more inelegant, and I just want to pursue these different ways of attaching the top. You can do it with these pieces of hardware, or you can do it with what I would call clips, either metal clips or wooden clips you make yourself. And I've used both of these these metal solutions, and am happiest probably with this one, but I'll explain the thinking process as I go through, so stay tuned. First ones I want to look at are what I'm calling clips. There are metal ones for sale on the market, and then you could make wooden ones out of just a block of wood that you cut. The metal ones work like this. You have to cut a kerf in the apron of the table, and these then are screwed to the tabletop, and as the tabletop expands they can slide in that kerf, and that's basically how the metal ones work. They're really inexpensive. Here are a couple of wooden ones, same idea. You have to cut a kerf in the apron, and the little wooden notch that you create, even these blocks would be screwed to the tabletop, and as the tabletop expands they can slide. I built a table like this a while ago, and instead of cutting a kerf in the aprons, I just used my biscuit cutter to cut a kerf. And once I had cut kerfs, I built these little wooden blocks, basically just a little notched block. Screw the block to the tabletop, and then the block is able to both slide left and right or in and out depending on which face of the tabletop you had them on. They worked pretty good, but not great. So I went and bought some hardware, and these figure eight I would say are the most elegant solution. With a Forstner bit you drill a 1/8 inch deep hole. In this case with these fasteners it was 5/8 inch diameter, and it simply sits in that little recess. You chip out the corners so it has the freedom of movement, and here's just an illustration of it. The hole on the right what it looks like after you've drilled it. The hole on the left you can see has got little notches removed from it so that there's some left to right movement. You put these on the aprons that are at the ends of your tabletop, because the tabletop is going to expand and contract across its grain. So this is what this looks like in the illustration, and here I am putting them on one of these nesting tables. Again, just take a Forstner bit, drill in to about 1/8 inch depth. That's how thick the metal fasteners are, 1/8 of an inch. So I did that in the four corners of the table, again on the end grain pieces of the tabletop, because the tabletop's going to expand and contract across its grain. So after cutting these holes, I took a small chisel and just nipped out the corners. Here's just sort of a tight fit on one, just to see it barely moves until you kind of nip those corners out. So you just take a chisel and just nip out ever so slightly, maybe 1/8 of an inch of those two corners, to allow the figure eight piece of metal to swivel. Again, how much movement the tabletop will actually have, I don't know. But with white oak, if it's rigid, if you've screwed them rigidly to the aprons, because the aprons are long grain and the tabletop would be a cross grain, if the tabletop shrinks at all, it will split. or if it expands at all, you might get warping. Either way, you can see I chipped those two little pieces out, and then that's how the fastener works and swivels. So after you've screwed all of those in, here I am again chipping out one more of those corners. And so you just screw those down into the apron, and they provide a nice countersunk hole so that the top of the figure eight and the top of the screw are both flush with your tabletop, so that you're screwing that down into the apron. You're screwing the other end of the figure eight up into the tabletop, and what you're doing is allowing movement across the grain of the tabletop. So here's a table that has those all attached, and you can see across the grain. The last type I used are these angle brackets, and you can see they've got slotted holes to allow movement. They've got slotted holes to allow movement in either direction depending on how you place them on the apron. So in this case, I put them on the long grain apron, but I have the slots located in and out so that, again, the tabletop can expand and contract across its grain, and the screw heads will simply slide in those slotted holes. So just locate those on your aprons right flush with the top of the apron, because the top is going to be up against your tabletop. And then they are provided with these flathead screws with, a flat washer type screw, so that there's less friction and they're allowed to slide. And you put the tabletop on using the screws, and you've got a safely attached tabletop. Again, when you flip the table over, which no one will ever do probably, they're not the best looking bracket. I think the figure eights are better looking. Of course, handmade wooden ones are probably cooler to look at, but as far as doing the job of securely attaching the tabletop and allowing for expansion and contraction in the wood, I think these are the easiest and best solution. I've put links to Amazon for this fastener, the figure eight fastener, and the metal clip fastener, so you can go see those fasteners on Amazon. They're all really inexpensive, and you're buying them in packages of 10 and 20 and 30. So as far as my little review goes of fastening tabletops, again, I think I land on this one as my favorite. Figure eight as maybe the most elegant connector. Metal clips, a little cheesy looking. They probably work great, but they're a little cheesy looking. Wooden clips, if you want that handmade look, they work great. They're just a little bit more hassle, and again, you have to cut those kerfs in your aprons, whether you use the metal clips or the wooden clips. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.